up, boyos? Welcome to a new sort of series on this channel that I'm gonna call Half-Life Obscurities. You may say my analysis of teleportation in the Half-Life universe was the unofficial first episode of this series, where I didn't quite know what I was doing, and the view count on the video shows, so here I am, I'm going to spell it out. I'm going to talk about some lore, much like Dread Isle series, but I'm going to put my own spin on the formula. I'll save the big stuff for Dread Isle, but I'm going to be talking about the lesser known stuff or go in depth on some other stuff that people haven't gone too in depth with before. Of course, since the lore of Half-Life isn't at the scale of, say, Star Wars, I'm basically going to fill in the gaps with some speculation, theorizing, and real-world stuff so I can better explain these topics that don't have much in the way of information on them. So, yeah. To kick off this series, for real this time, I want to talk about something that I've been wanting to get off my chest ever since Mark Laidlaw's Epistle 3 took the internet by storm. There's been, from what I've seen, almost no talking or theorizing about it at all. When it came out, I saw Dread Isle's video on it, and then Valve News Network's, but what was weird about it is, when the Half-Life community began to talk about it, they didn't dive deep into its implications for the rest of the universe. No. They just translated it as best they could, which they did a shit job of, by the way. And then they proceeded to go shit on Valve for not making this into an actual game. It wasn't even that people didn't like the story, it was just that they got caught up in the fact that the story had been leaked to them and they didn't get the game for 10 years. I'm not saying that people don't have the right to be mad, they totally do. Hell, I was pissed too. The thing is, I feel that all the videos saying Valve owes us nothing but a conclusion or something like that distracted from what's actually important about this if you're a Half-Life fan. That you now know the ending of the game. Hell, even the overwiki isn't even treating it like canon. So that's what I'm here to do. I'm going to actually dive into the story and tell you about what I found from looking into Epistle 3 and tell you what's good. So yeah. Let's begin with another big crime the community has committed against this story. I mentioned it earlier, they've done a shit job at translating it from Mark's original version, where all the proper nouns are replaced with placeholders. I've listened to people dub it, and there's things they get wrong every time, because the person translating didn't know enough about Half-Life's lore to know what was actually happening. For example, the translations accidentally say that Gordon Freeman went to Antarctica on a seaplane. Did these guys even play Episode 2? No, he's going north to the Arctic, Alex says because that's where Judith went, in a helicopter. You even see in the infamous cliffhanger to Episode 2. I sort of wonder if these guys were really Half-Life fans, or if they just heard Half-Life 3 was leaked and attempted to jump on the bandwagon without even knowing anything about anything. Anyways, I went through Epistle 3 and I paid attention to detail, and I translated the whole thing to how it should be. I've linked it in the description if you want to see it. So now we can begin to look deeper. To start, it seems Gordon, since the events of Episode 3, has been going through a fuck ton of adventures. It wouldn't surprise me if by the time he wrote this letter, he's looking more like Ivan the space biker than his normal self. According to him, he's been gone for years. Given he sort of breaks the fourth wall, saying that Half-Life 2 Episode 2 was his previous letter, I'll assume he's been gone for the same amount of time which we've waited for Episode 3, about 10 years. I find this fascinating for reasons I'll touch on more later, but I do want to say, if there are any Half-Life mappers and modders who have the ambition to expand the universe beyond Half-Life 2, then I think you have a ton of material to work with. A full 10 years of time where you can make whatever story you want. Moving on, as the story goes, immediately after burying Eli, Alex and Gordon take the helicopter up north to the Arctic, with other resistance groups following. It doesn't specifically state that Barney is part of this group, but, well, I hope he is. I both love and hate the story for not including something about Barney, or even Adrian for that matter. We don't get a conclusion to their stories, but maybe that's a good thing. they can be left open for the 10 years worth of Half-Life fan games to tackle. And speaking of leaving things open, Laidlaw has Gordon say that most of his initial time in the Arctic was a, quote, jumbled blur. It's like this story was designed to be made into a fan game. In fact, let's talk about that a minute. I remember hearing someone on the Lambda Generation Discord say something about Laidlaw saying something about this story in particular being just a Half-Life fanfiction, and the wiki says the same thing. However, I did some research and couldn't find Laidlaw saying this specifically. I'm not very good at research, so he may have said it anyway, and I just didn't find it. But still, it can be deduced that this is still based off of whatever the original story for Episode 3 was. However, I think that he changed things from the original Valve version for various reasons, and this is a good example. I'm sure Valve's version had some more of a story for this part, but Mark most definitely deleted it so the fans could fit it in. Hell, I'd go as far as saying that he altered the story specifically to edge fans into making their very own Episode 3, given Valve doesn't seem like they're going to be doing it themselves. I'm going to come back to this point later as well. Anyways, Alex and Gordon eventually come to where the Borealis should be, though in its place is a large Combine installation, which we actually got leaked to us a few years ago, back in a concept art leak. Hell, quick note about that, there's some concept art that doesn't quite fit into the rest of Epistle 3's story. Some of it does, but like the one that with Gordon and the Advisor was not part of Epistle 3, so it makes me think that that was part of the cut story that Mark cut out. But anyways, we see the Borealis' lensing teleportation at work here. I talked a little bit about this in my teleportation episode, and that this was a new type that we haven't seen before. The cool thing is that it seems to double as a time travel method, which also opens up some potentially material for any of you mappers out there. Next, we have Gordon and Alex captured by Dr. Breen, or at least his reincarnate. This is actually a callback to another Mark Laidlaw fan fiction, his Breengrub Twitter account. Because of this, I decided to change him from being called a slug to a grub in my translation. I'll have to make a separate video all about it, but it's basically the Breengrub having an existential crisis because he's basically found out about the origin of the Combine, or at least the Advisors, and they're trying to silence his own thoughts and keep moving him around from host body to host body. I like to think it's canon, at least to Epistle 3, and he eventually ends up with Gordon and Alex. It's also worth noting that his grub, as the Breengrub puts it, is the larval state of a Combine Advisor, and pretty soon Breen may turn into one. Now, it's actually fun fact about that: if you, the texture that is used for the Breengrub Twitter account is actually the juvenile Advisor model back from I think it was another leak. It might have been a Half-Life 2 leak, but I think it might have been a concept art leak. Maybe both, who knows. Reading Breengrub and Epistle 3 kind of makes you feel bad for Breen, so you can see why Gordon wanted to help kill him like Breen wanted. But more importantly, it emphasizes something else. Alex has become a bit of an asshole, from all the trauma of losing her father, and it is especially seen later when she murders Mossman, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So Alex and Gordon soon come across Judith, and Alex continues to be an asshole, and immediately blames Judith for her father's death. In response, Judith reveals that she was actually a triple agent who was working as a spy in the Combine, as a spy in the Resistance, but was really a spy for the Resistance the whole time. That sort of makes sense with the lead up to the Battle of City 17. Here's a theory. Maybe because she made a big deal with the Combine, that actually had the Combine turn a blind eye to the Resistance so that the Resistance could build their teleporter, and upon completion, Judith was supposed to let them know so they could attack and steal it. Judith was going to not actually give away that they had done it, and just let the Combine think they were still working on the teleporter, effectively keeping the Resistance off the Combine's radar indefinitely. But Gordon Freeman's arrival ironically messed that whole thing up. and ended up working in the favor of the Combine instead. Tell me what you think of that theory speculation thing. The next part is probably the most important of them all. The big kahuna that both Half-Life and Portal have been building up to. The Borealis itself. First off, Judith has these resonance keys that allow them to board the vessel since it's sort of stuck between the 7-hour war and the present. I have a feeling these resonance keys are another placeholder name that Laidlaw replaced, but the thing is, we have no idea what it originally was supposed to be. There's nothing in Half-Life or Portal that I can think of that could be what these keys are supposed to be, so I guess whatever they are, they're unfortunately now lost forever. Unfortunately. But anyway, they board the Borealis, and then Freeman explains how it was teleported to the Arctic during the 9-hour Armageddon, 7-hour war, to the Arctic from its original location in the research facility on Tuscan Island in Lake Huron, which I translated to the Aperture Science Enrichment Center in Lake Michigan. And stop! We have a big problem. None of this is canon. This entire thing was retconned in Portal 1 and 2. A lot of this was rewritten by Eric Wolpaw in Portal 2 especially. We see the dry dock is actually underground, in an abandoned area that hasn't been used since at least the 1970s or 80s. Plus, there'd be no one left in the facility to teleport the ship anywhere at the time of the 7-hour war, because GLaDOS neurotoxin genocide happened before even the Black Mesa incident. And given Eli and Kleiner know about the ship's disappearance, it likely also happened before the Black Mesa incident, and thus before the 7-hour war. So this part of the story technically didn't even happen, because it makes no sense with anything else. So what actually did happen? I have a theory about it, and it involves the Borealis teleportation device itself, the bootstrap device. Okay, I sort of stole this theory from VGTI, but I don't think he does YouTube anymore, so I guess it's mine for the taking. Besides, I have more to add. The theory that he made before Epistle 3 even came out was that the teleportation device that we all kind of suspected was on the Borealis for years, which we now know as the bootstrap device, was actually the multiverse device from the Portal 2 Community Perpetual Testing Initiative DLC. Though they have different names, do remember that most of the names in Epistle 3 have been swapped around. The bootstrap device may just be a placeholder name for the multiverse device. Now, the story in the Perpetual Testing Initiative isn't actually canon. But what if, and this is where my theory begins, it doesn't even have to be, what if all other Aperture Sciences in parallel universes created multiverse devices to travel to other ones, but the Aperture Science in the Half-Life universe, when trying to build their multiverse device, failed, and that multiverse device was what was on the Borealis. It would make some sense, given that the Cave Johnsons heard from other universes aren't dying from moon rock poisoning, or they might be in the very early stages of it, which means that the multiverse device was probably invented back in the 1970s or 80s, around the same time that the Borealis was likely to have been lost. So it is possible that, with the malfunctioning multiverse device, the Borealis got caught between 2 points in space-time, and that's how you see it in Episode 3. And hell, to add even more to that, it may fill a plot hole I've noticed in Portal for a while. How does Aperture Science possess Combine technology? They have the high energy pellets, the light bridges, and I can assume that the emancipation grids are a lot similar to the Combine suppression field things. What if, when the Borealis was phasing between 70s Aperture and the Arctic Combine base, it teleported some Combine tech from the base back in time? Remember that Kleiner did say that part of the dry dock went with the vessel, so it's possible that stuff around it got caught in the big time loop and ended up crashing back in 1970-something. That would be very interesting. Please tell me what you think about this theory, too. Alright, let's keep moving forward. They board the ship, they have their time travel acid trip, and then they eventually see the Combine Dyson Sphere. I think that this is supposed to be the Combine overworld, just seen from a distance. I guess the Citadel scene in the end of Half-Life 2 were actually the surface of the sphere. Maybe someone can make a mod that changes the overworld scene in Half-Life 2 to look more Dyson sphere-y. It would add a nice touch. Of course, Alex and Judith argue what to do with the ship, and in one last act of assholiness, Alex shoots and kills Judith, and sends the Borealis hurtling towards the Combine's invasion nexus in hopes of blowing it up. Finally, let's talk about the ending, which is what made me want to make this video in the first place. The reason being that I feel that there is a huge amount of symbolism in this one scene that I guarantee you no one else is talking about. Firstly, we have the G-Man reappearing out of nowhere to pick up Alex Vance and leaving Freeman to his fate aboard the Borealis. Fortunately, Freeman is saved moments later by the Vortigaunts. Let's dissect this. I made a theory in the past talking about how the G-Man is basically Valve, at work in the Half-Life universe, and that his actions often reflect what Valve has been doing behind the scenes in the real world. I also think that this is another scene that was changed from its original by Laidlaw when he leaked it. In this scene, I feel G-Man is, as always, representing Valve, and Alex is representing the other games Valve has been working on since, instead of Half-Life. More specifically, Portal, Counter-Strike, TF2, and Dota. When Alex was a child, and was left in the middle of the Black Mesa incident, the G-Man saved her, bringing her to safety under his protection. I see a similarity between that and how Valve has bought up indie developers of small games and mods, taken them under their wing. The original Counter-Strike was a Half-Life mod who Valve bought out to publish and eventually turn into a series, and after Episode 2 they eventually made CSGO, which has become one of their biggest cash cows. Team Fortress was a Quake mod until Valve bought them up and eventually helped them make TF2. Portal's dev team made a similar game about Portal-based puzzles called Narbacular Drop that was eventually bought out by Valve as well. They were all hired and stuff. And the devs of a small game called Dota were also bought out by Valve to make Dota 2. All the while, Half-Life is symbolized by Gordon Freeman himself, were left by the wayside, while Valve, the G-Man, pursued the more attractive business model. And so Gordon, Half-Life, was left alone to die, but saved at the last moment by the Vortigaunts, the community. I think that this is Mark Laidlaw's message to all of us, to tell the Half-Life community that they can save the series by pulling him out of certain death and sending him on years worth of adventures. We can continue the Half-Life series from here on out. Valve's gone. They went through the interdimensional door with the other games a long time ago. Now, it's our turn to finish the story. We have some loose ends we can tie up, whether it's Freeman himself or Barney or Adrian. Black Mesa Source, the Epistle 3 fan games, Lost Squad, they're all steps in the right direction. I mean, of course we've had Hunt Down the Freeman and Prospect, but those are just bumps in the road. We can keep going. We can keep going for years and years and... I don't think